Alan Moore's Watchmen changed the perception of American comics forever. It took the prototypical archetypes that inundated the industry for decades and flipped them on their head. It was more than mere deconstruction of the tropes we all know and love. It was a compulsory examination of the human psyche. In this regard, instead of vicariously experiencing the inner tumult of the superheroes on the page, it was, more or less, a reflective mirror held up to the reader's face, forcing them to descend into their own ocean of feelings and biases, and question them. The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die, as well as the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions. They cease to be mind. Seymour, for God's sakes, I'm asking you to take responsibility for once in your miserable life. I leave it entirely in your hands. To understand my introductory premise, I want to highlight the 4 driving characters / forces in the manga, which represent 4 divergent viewpoints to the human condition. First up, we have Rorschach. Live our lives lacking anything better to do. Devise reason later. Born from oblivion. Bear children, hellbound as ourselves. Go into oblivion. There is nothing else. Rorschach's disposition is black and white, hence the ink-block mask that mimics the Rorschach psychological test. Everything for this brooding vigilante predicates on the idea of good versus evil. If one is not good, by default, in Rorschach's mind, they're evil, and vice versa. There's no gray in Rorschach's dichotomous worldview. He's emblematic of a precocious adolescent who can't see the forest for the trees. And in his attempts to rectify petty crimes, he becomes, more or less, sinful himself, stealing other people's beans via breaking and entering into their houses, and terrorizing civilians at a local bar. But for Rorschach, he eliminates his own moral wickedness from the equation in an effort to cleanse the world from depravity. Yet, he is depravity himself, with his disheveled attire, ill manners, unyielding moral compass, and overall disbelief in others, save for a few individuals. In fact, because he considers the comedian a patriot, he brushes off his rape incident as a moral lapse, indicating to the reader that once Rorschach has categorized someone as good or evil in his head, he uses confirmation bias to support his viewpoint. The idea behind this character is to present the inflexible superhero whom Moore believes would create more problems than they would solve, would be a hindrance and a blight on society via focusing on problems in front of them rather than seeking a bigger picture resolution. I wanted to kind of make this like, yeah, this is what Batman would be in the real world. I meant him to be a bad example, but I have people come up to me in the street saying, I'm Rorschach, that is my story. And I'll be thinking, yeah, great, can you just keep away from me? Never come anywhere near me again as long as I live? Disgust with dirt. Evil can be so great that it prevents us from cleansing ourselves, from justifying ourselves. Rorschach's morality is stringent to the point that he cannot reconcile his own iniquity. He therefore disassociates himself from his ego consciousness through his vigilante persona, who is every bit as loathsome as the evildoers he aims to bring to justice. Moving on, we have Edward Blake, i.e. the comedian. Once you realize what a joke everything is, being the comedian is the only thing that makes sense. Blake, unsurprisingly, reminds me a lot of George Carlin.
The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't.
A maverick who sees beyond society's binary ideals via viewing it through the lens of a practical joke. Rather than holding himself on a pedestal, like Rorschach, he takes on the position that he understands what's happening, but merely accepts it as a reality of life. In fact, he takes advantage of situations for his own benefit, because he doesn't attribute significance to moral values. Hence, he played a critical role in the Vietnam War by burning down villages and killing a woman who claimed that got her pregnant. His deliberate amoralism stems from the notion that life is without meaning, and one should enjoy the ride, lest he becomes the butt of the joke. Next up, we have Dr. Manhattan. We are just puppets, Laurie. I'm just a puppet who can see the strings. Like the comedian, Dr. Manhattan has an understanding of the world that transcends the lay public. But unlike Mr. Blake, the blue, godlike man becomes detached from civilization and indifferent towards its outcomes. For him, life and death are equally the same, leading him to abandon Earth to create his own kingdom on Mars. Because of his inordinate strength and intelligence, human life means nothing to him. Because time is simultaneous, free will is an illusion, bolstering his nihilistic viewpoint on reality. Those are my enemies. They want to overthrow and to construct nothing themselves. They say, all that is worthless, and want to create no value themselves. Now, of course, Dr. Manhattan created a magnificent kingdom on Mars's surface. However, he did so out of mere boredom and failed to allow his emotions to be affected by the process of creation. One does not achieve goals simply because they're easy. No, we wish to strive for the impossible, the unreachable, the unattainable. The challenge reveals our inner character, which allows us to experience more of ourselves than ever before. A nihilist, in this regard, experiences very little compared to their talent, because they've fallen into a grave of meaninglessness that they have dug themselves. It isn't until Dr. Manhattan witnesses Ozymandias' plan come to fruition that he realizes this for himself. Thus began my path to conquest. Conquest not of men, but the evils that beset them. No one saves us from the evil of becoming unless we choose to go through hell. Error, the belief in the ideal, is not blindness. Error is cowardice. Every conquest, every step forward in knowledge is the outcome of courage, of hardness towards oneself, of cleanliness towards oneself. I do not refute ideals. All I do is to draw on my gloves in their presence. Rorschach was a victim of his own moral code. The comedian could do nothing more than laugh at the ills of the world, and Dr. Manhattan saw no point in it all. Ozymandias saw beyond them all, a vision that no one else dared dream, a vision that resolved the ongoing nuclear arms race via imposing a greater threat, a threat that could not be ignored, a threat that dissolved old feuds and forged new alliances, a united society that could uplift civilization to new heights. Now, of course, there was a terrible cost involved. Namely, 3 million lives in New York, along with untold emotional strain. However, unlike modern wars that are solely fought over for material gain and enriching the elite, Ozymandias sought an end result that would enrich society in the long run. Like a chess game, Ozymandias made a short-term sacrifice for a long-term reward. We are buds on a single tree. What do we know what can become of us from the interest of the tree? Get beyond myself and yourself. Experience cosmically. If we equate human society to a tree, then we can visualize the scenario in which certain components of the tree might be sacrificed for its long-term health and future growth. Ozymandias views society in this regard, by sacrificing 3 million people to avoid the potential eradication of the entire human species through mutually assured destruction. And given the population of roughly 5 billion people in 1987, when the Watchmen comic was released, it's roughly a 0.06% sacrifice to preserve everyone. Furthermore, if we factor in future generations that will be given a chance at life because of this sacrifice, then the percentage is even lower. The obvious refutation to this assertion is that we don't know if complete destruction would have happened regardless of the sacrifice, which could have made the whole incident unnecessary. In the end, like Alan Moore stated, the decision is in your hands. Or perhaps in your mind. We can only speak of the relativity of good and evil in individual cases. The categories of good and evil cannot be suspended. They are continually alive and cannot be attached to material things.